The rain fell in relentless sheets, drumming against the canopy of towering evergreens in Seattle's Discovery Park. Claire Thompson, stood shivering in a thin coat, my auburn hair plastered to my face as David Miller's voice cut through the storm. "Let's get married, Claire." His words were as cold as the Pacific Northwest wind delivered with the same detached precision I'd heard in my past life. His pale blue eyes, framed by dark lashes, held no warmth, only the faint glint of expectation. The prayer beads coiled around his wrist gleamed faintly under the park's dim lamplight, symbolizing his monk-like facade. This was a romantic moment to anyone watching a man proposing under a stormy sky, but I knew better. I was reborn at this exact moment, my soul jolted back into my 25-year-old body by a mysterious force, as if fate had granted me a second chance to rewrite a story that ended in flames. In my previous life, I had said yes to David, my heart swelling with naive hope. We married, flew to Miami for our honeymoon, and then tragedy struck. A fire engulfed our hotel, trapping me and David's niece's dog, Emma. When Emma wailed, "Uncle, save my dog," David didn't even glance my way. He plunged into the inferno for that scruffy mutt, leaving me to choke on smoke and burn alive. As my life faded, I saw Emma's social media post, a photo of her hugging the dog, captioned, "My uncle would pluck the stars for me." That was when the truth hit me. David's love for his non-blood-related niece was no innocent affection. I had been a shield, a decoy to mask his forbidden obsession. Now, standing before him again, the memory of those flames seared my mind, and my heart pounded with a mix of fury and resolve. I would never marry him again. The rain stung my cheeks as I studied David, his tailored coat barely touched by the downpour. He stood like a statue, serene yet untouchable, his prayer beads clicking softly as he shifted. I mistook his detachment for spiritual depth in my past life, but now I saw it for what it was, a carefully crafted mask. "Claire," he repeated, his voice edging impatiently. "Let's get married." The words were identical to those in my last life, but they didn't sway me this time. My fingers trembled, not from the cold, but from the weight of my rebirth. Why had I been given this chance? Was it divine intervention, a cosmic glitch, or my unyielding will refusing to let my story end in ashes? I didn't know, but I felt the fire of purpose burning within me. This time I would dismantle David's illusions and walk away free. I tilted my head, letting the rain mask the tears threatening to spill. My parents, John and Linda Thompson, flashed through my mind. In my past life, they'd begged me to reconsider marrying David, sensing his coldness, but I ignored them. After my death, their grief consumed them, leading to their own passing within years. The memory of their tear-streaked faces at my funeral fueled my resolve. I wouldn't let them suffer again. I took a shaky breath, meeting David's gaze. "All right, David," I said, my voice steady, despite the storm raging inside me. "But only if we have a grand wedding in 5 days. I want the whole city to see it." His brow furrowed slightly, a crack in his composed exterior. I saw unease flicker in his eyes for a moment, but he nodded. "Fine," he said, his tone as icy as the rain. As he turned to leave, I lingered under the park's canopy, my heart racing. This wedding would be my weapon, a stage to expose David's secrets. I imagined the guests' gasps, the whispers of scandal, and felt a spark of grim satisfaction. But beneath it, the trauma of my death lingered. Last night, I'd woken screaming, my skin burning with phantom flames, the smell of smoke choking my lungs. I hadn't just returned to life, I carried the weight of my past suffering. Yet that pain was my strength now. It reminded me why I couldn't falter. I glanced at my phone, where I'd started documenting my story for a small YouTube channel I ran, sharing tales of resilience. If you're watching this, dear viewers, hit that like button if you've ever wanted a second chance to right a wrong. Comment your own stories of redemption, and subscribe to follow my journey. I'm just getting started. Back at my apartment, I sat at my desk, rain dripping from my coat, and called my parents. "Mom, Dad," I whispered into the phone, my voice breaking. "I'm not marrying David. Not this time. I... I've been given another chance." My mother's gasp crackled through the line. "Claire, what are you talking about?" I hesitated, then poured out the truth, my death, rebirth, and plan. Silence followed, then my father's gruff voice. "We knew he was wrong for you. Whatever you're doing, we're with you." Their support was a lifeline, grounding me as I faced the days ahead. I hung up staring out at Seattle's misty skyline, the Space Needle a faint silhouette. David thought he could control me again, but he was wrong. This time I was in control and would burn his world down before he could burn mine. 5 years ago, on my 20th birthday, I met David Miller at a charity gala in Portland's Pearl District. The venue buzzed with wealthy airs, clinking champagne glasses, their laughter echoing off exposed brick walls. Amid the chaos, David sat alone, his pale blue traditional robe contrasting with the flashy suits around him. His slender fingers were toyed with prayer beads, and his face was serene and almost ethereal, like a monk untouched by worldly desires. I was smitten, instantly drawn to his quiet intensity. He stood out like a lighthouse in a storm, and I, Claire Thompson, was a ship desperate for guidance. I spent the next 5 years chasing him, ignoring my friends' warnings that no woman could crack the emotionless son of God, as they called him. I didn't care. I believed love could conquer his detachment. My pursuit was relentless. I sent handwritten letters, showed up at his favorite coffee shop in Northwest Portland, and even joined his meditation group, stumbling through chance to catch his eye. David remained aloof, his responses polite but distant, his prayer beads a constant barrier between us. My parents, John and Linda, watched with growing concern. "Claire, he's too cold," my mom said one evening over dinner, her hazel eyes worried. "You deserve someone who lights up when they see you." My dad, a gruff mechanic, added, "He's hiding something, kid. Trust your gut." But I was blind convinced David's restraint was a sign of depth. After 5 years of rejection, I nearly gave up, my heart bruised from unreturned affection. Then, out of nowhere, he proposed. It was a crisp autumn day, much like this reborn moment when David said, "Let's get married, Claire. No ring, no bended knee, just those blunt words in a Portland park." I was overjoyed, ignoring the red flags. He insisted on no wedding ceremony, no legal registration, claiming his Buddhist practices shunned worldly traditions. I rationalized it, telling myself his spirituality made him unique. On our wedding night, in a minimalist loft he owned, he refused to touch me, citing a vow of purity. I convinced myself it was noble, but unease gnawed at me. Then I wandered downstairs to his meditation room late that night, seeking comfort. What I found shattered me. The door creaked open, revealing David kneeling before a life-size doll, its features eerily identical to Emma, his 18-year-old niece. The doll, custom-made by a secretive craftsman in San Francisco, was dressed in Emma's favorite sundress, its blonde hair styled just like hers. David's hands trembled as he adjusted its pose, his breath ragged. I froze, nausea rising. He was using it to channel desires he couldn't admit, desires for the girl he'd raised since her parents died in a car crash when she was 5. When he saw me, his face paled. "Claire, it's not what you think," he stammered, shoving the doll behind a screen. In a panic, he promised a lavish honeymoon in Miami to appease me, and I agreed, desperate to salvage my dream. The honeymoon was a disaster waiting to happen. We checked into a beachfront hotel, the air thick with salt and promise. Emma, who'd thrown a tantrum to join us, trailed behind with her scruffy terrier Max. I tried to bond with her, but her sullen glares made it clear I was an intruder. On the third night, a fire alarm blared. Smoke filled the halls, and I was trapped in our suite with Max, who'd slipped inside. Flames licked the walls as I screamed for help. Outside, Emma's voice pierced the chaos. "Uncle, save Max, I can't lose him." Without a second's hesitation, David burst through the fire for the dog, his silhouette vanishing into the smoke. He left me behind, my cries drowned by the roar of the blaze. As my vision faded, the betrayal cut deeper than the flames. After my death, I lingered as a spirit, watching Emma post on Instagram from a Miami hospital. She hugged Max, her caption gloating, "My uncle would pluck the stars for me." The photo was a knife to my heart, confirming David's obsession. I'd been a pawn, married to hide his shameful longing for his niece, who wasn't even blood-related, but whom he'd raised like a daughter. The realization twisted my soul, but also sparked the fire of my rebirth. As I stood in my new life, the memory of that betrayal fueled my plan. David's proposal in Seattle was the starting line, and I was ready to run not toward him, but away toward a life where I'd never burn again. The Seattle rain had softened to a drizzle, but the chill lingered in my bones as I stood in David Miller's sprawling Oregon estate, a modern fortress of glass and cedar in the hills outside Portland. The prayer beads on his wrist clicked softly as he unpacked my suitcase, his movements precise, almost mechanical. "This is your home now, Claire," he said, his voice as cool as the marble floors. In my past life, I'd mistaken his serene detachment for wisdom, a monk-like purity that set him apart from the world's chaos. But now, reborn with the scars of betrayal, I saw the truth. David's calmness was a mask hiding a dark obsession that had cost me my life. The memory of flames and his choice to save Emma's dog over me burned in my mind, and I was here to unravel his secrets. In my previous life, the night before our doomed honeymoon, I'd stumbled into his meditation room in our Portland loft. The air was thick with incense, and there under the flicker of candlelight was a life-size doll featuring an uncanny replica of Emma, his 18-year-old niece. Blonde curls, wide blue eyes, even the freckles across her nose, every detail was perfect, crafted by a reclusive San Francisco artisan known for discreet commissions. David knelt before it, his hands adjusting its sundress, his breath uneven. The sight had turned my stomach, revealing the depth of his fixation on Emma, whom he'd raised since her parents' car accident when she was 5. When he caught me staring, his face drained of color. "Claire, it's not what you think," he stammered, shoving the doll into a locked cabinet. Desperate to keep me quiet, he promised a Miami honeymoon, and I, foolishly in love, let it go. That mistake led to my death in the fire. Now reborn, I stood in his estate's guest room, my fingers tracing the edge of my wedding dress, a cream silk gown I'd chosen for the grand wedding I demanded. The 5-day countdown was my strategy, a public spectacle to expose David's perversion. I'd found the doll again, hidden in a locked room in the estate's basement, its presence a chilling reminder of his secret. I'd taken photos, my hands shaking as I snapped each one, knowing they'd be my weapon. But as I unpacked, the front door slammed, and Emma's voice echoed through the house. "Uncle David, I'm here." She called, her tone sugary, yet sharp. My heart sank. In my past life, Emma's tantrums and manipulations had driven a wedge between David and me, her entitlement fueled by his indulgence. I braced myself for her arrival. Emma stormed into the room, her blonde hair bouncing, her blue eyes narrowing at seeing me. "Uncle, why does she get to live here?" she whined, flopping onto the hardwood floor like a petulant child. Descending the staircase, David softened instantly, his prayer beads still, as he knelt beside her. "Emma Claire's my fiancée. She belongs here," he said, his voice tender in a way it never was with me. Emma's parents had died when she was young, leaving David to raise her, and that bond had twisted into something unhealthy, her possessiveness a product of his unchecked devotion. "You don't love me anymore, do you?" she cried, clutching his sleeve. "You used to let me stay here all the time." David's eyes betrayed a storm of emotions, guilt, longing, restraint, but he coaxed her up. "You're not a burden, Emma. Never think that." I watched from the doorway, my stomach twisting. In my past life, Emma's provocations were relentless, stealing my things, spreading lies, always painting herself as the victim. David believed her every time, dismissing my pain. I saw the same pattern unfolding, but I wasn't the same Claire. I stepped forward, forcing a smile. "Emma, we'll all get along just fine," I said, my voice steady but laced with intent. She shot me a smug glance, her lips curling. "We'll see about that, Aunt Claire." David's gaze flickered between us, his composure faltering for a moment. I could tell he sensed my change, but he didn't know the half of it. As Emma flounced off to her room, I slipped my phone from my pocket, checking the photos of the doll. 5 days until the wedding, I was ready to light the fuse. The estate's silence was oppressive that night, broken only by the distant hum of Portland's city lights beyond the hills. I lay awake replaying David's proposal in the rain-soaked park, his words echoing like a warning. "Let's get married." In my past life, I'd said yes without hesitation, blind to his obsession. Now I saw every glance he gave Emma, every softening of his voice, as proof of his betrayal. The doll, locked away yet ever present, was the key to his undoing. I'd make sure the world saw it, not just for revenge, but to free myself from the chains of a love that had burned me alive. As I drifted to sleep, the weight of my plan settled over me, a mix of dread and determination. David thought he could control this story, but I was rewriting the ending. The Oregon sunrise filtered through the estate's floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the polished wood floors. I sat at the kitchen island, clutching a mug of coffee, its warmth a small comfort against the chill of my memories. Every night since my rebirth, I'd woken gasping, my skin burning with phantom flames, the acrid smell of smoke filling my lungs. The trauma of my death in that Miami hotel fire clung to me like a second skin, a constant reminder of David's betrayal. I'd died screaming his name, believing he'd come for me, only to watch him save Emma's dog instead. That pain wasn't just a memory, it was a fire in my chest, fueling my resolve to break free from him forever. But freedom wasn't easy. My heart, still scarred from 5 years of unrequited love, ached with every step I took toward letting go. I'd called my parents, John and Linda Thompson, the night after David's proposal in Seattle. Sitting in my apartment, rain tapping the windows, I'd confessed everything. My death, my rebirth, my plan to expose David at the wedding. My mother's voice cracked over the phone. "Claire, we told you he was wrong for you," she said, her words heavy with years of worry. "He never looked at you the way you deserved." My father, usually stoic, choked up. "You're our girl. Whatever you need, we're here." In my past life, I'd ignored their warnings, too smitten with David's serene aura to see his coldness. After my death, their grief had broken them, leading to their own passing within years. Now their support was a lifeline. "I'm not marrying him, I promised. I'm doing this for me and for you." Hanging up, I felt a spark of strength. I wouldn't let them lose me again. Back in the estate, I moved through the day like a ghost, organizing my belongings while keeping an eye on David. He was studying, poring over meditation texts, his prayer beads clicking rhythmically. I'd seen his ascetic habits as noble in my past life, but now I knew they were a shield for his obsession with Emma. The doll hidden in the basement was proof, a grotesque monument to his desires, ordered from a San Francisco craftsman specializing in lifelike replicas. I'd found it yesterday, its blonde curls and blue eyes a perfect match for Emma's, and the sight had nearly made me sick. But it also hardened my resolve. I'd slipped the photos onto a USB drive, my hands trembling as I hid it in my purse. The wedding was 4 days away, and those images would be my weapon. Emma's presence made every moment tense. She flitted through the house, her laughter sharp and calculated, always watching me. At breakfast, she accidentally spilled juice on my sketchbook, where I'd been drafting designs, a hobby I'd abandoned in my past life to chase David. "Oops," she said, smirking. "You should be more careful, Aunt Claire." David, sipping tea, barely looked up. "Emma, clean it up," he said mildly, but his eyes lingered on her with a softness that twisted my gut. I'd argued with her in my past life, desperate to win David's favor, but it always backfired. Now I stayed silent, wiping the pages clean my mind on the bigger plan. Emma's entitlement came from her tragic past. Her parents' death had left her in David's care, and his indulgence had warped her into a manipulative force. Knowing this didn't soften my anger, but it clarified her motives. That afternoon, I drove into Portland to meet my parents at their modest suburban home. My mom pulled me into a hug, her eyes searching mine. "You look haunted, Claire," she said. I admitted the nightmares, the way the fire still burned in my dreams. "I see it every night," I whispered. "The smoke, the heat, David running for that dog." My dad's jaw tightened. "He doesn't deserve you. Never did." We sat in their cozy living room, surrounded by photos of my childhood, and I felt the weight of my rebirth's purpose. I wasn't just avenging myself, I was protecting them, giving them the daughter they'd lost. "I'm going to expose him," I said. "At the wedding, everyone will see who he really is." My mom squeezed my hand. "Be careful, sweetheart. You're stronger than you know." Back at the estate, I stood in my room, staring at my wedding dress in the closet. The silk shimmered, a symbol of the life I'd once wanted. But love wasn't enough, not when it closed my eyes to David's truth. The trauma of my death had awakened something fiercer in me, a clarity that cut through my old devotion. I wasn't the Claire who'd chased him for 5 years. I was someone new, forged in fire, ready to tear down his world. As I closed the closet door, I heard Emma's voice downstairs, whining to David about some trivial want. His soothing reply echoed, and I clenched my fists. 3 days left. I'd survived flames once. I could survive this. The Oregon estate's glass walls reflected the morning mist, a deceptive calm over David Miller's sprawling home in the hills outside Portland. Claire Thompson, stood in the foyer, my suitcase at my feet, the weight of my rebirth heavy in my chest. 3 days remained until the grand wedding. I'd demanded a public stage to expose David's obsession with his niece Emma. The photos of the life-size doll, a grotesque replica of her hidden in the basement, were safely stored on a USB drive in my purse. My plan was set, but the ache of my past life's betrayal lingered, the memory of flames licking my skin as David chose Emma's dog over me. I pushed the thought down, focusing on the present as the front door swung open with a dramatic bang. Emma stormed in her blonde curls, bouncing her blue eyes flashing with entitlement. At 18, she carried herself like the queen of this house, a role David had nurtured since her parents died in a car accident when she was 5. Uncle David, she called, her voice a mix of sugar and venom. Why is she here? She pointed at me, her lips curling into a pout as she dropped her designer bag on the hardwood floor. David descended the staircase, his prayer beads clicking softly, his face softening in a way that made my stomach churn. This tenderness for Emma had been my undoing in my past life. Her tantrums always trumped my pain. Emma, he said, kneeling beside her. Claire's my fiancée. She lives here now. You know that. His voice was gentle, starkly contrasting with the cold tone he used with me. Emma flopped onto the floor, her sundress fanning like a child's. You used to let me stay here all the time, she whined, clutching his arm. Now you've got her, and I'm nothing to you. Her eyes darted to me, sharp with challenge. I remembered her games from my past life, stealing my jewelry, spreading lies, always painting herself as the innocent victim. David believed her every time, dismissing my protests. Now reborn, I saw her for what she was, a girl warped by David's indulgence, her possessiveness rooted in a childhood clinging to him as her only family. But understanding didn't dull my anger. I stepped forward, forcing a smile. I said, Emma will make this work calm, but laced with steel. She smirked, undeterred. Sure, Aunt Claire. We'll see. David's gaze flickered between us, his composure faltering. Emma, get up. The floor's cold, he said, helping her stand. His tenderness for her was a knife to my heart, a reminder of how he'd chosen her dog over me in that Miami fire. I turned away, carrying my suitcase upstairs, my mind racing. My parents, John and Linda Thompson, had called last night, their voices thick with worry. Claire, be careful, my mom had said. That girl's trouble and David's blind to it. In my past life, I'd ignored their warnings too, in love to see the truth. After my death, their grief had destroyed them, my father's heart failing my mother, fading soon after. Now their support was my anchor. I'd promised to protect them, and exposing David was the first step. Upstairs, I unpacked in the guest room, my wedding dress hanging in the closet like a silent vow. The silk shimmered, symbolizing the life I'd once craved with David. But Claire was gone, burned away in the fire of his betrayal. I glanced at my phone, the USB drive tucked beside it. The doll's photos were my leverage proof of David's twisted desires. Emma's arrival had set the stage for chaos just as before, but this time, I was ready. As I folded my clothes, her voice drifted up from the living room, whining about wanting to redecorate her room mine. David's soothing replies followed, and I clenched my fists. I'd fought her provocations in my past life only to lose to her lies. Now I'd play her game, but on my terms. I sat on the balcony that evening, the Portland skyline twinkling in the distance. The trauma of my death haunted me. Nightmares of smoke and screams woke me nightly, my skin prickling with phantom burns. But those memories also sharpened my purpose. I wasn't just fighting for myself, I was fighting for the life I'd lost, for my parents' peace. Emma's laughter echoed below, a calculated taunt. She thought she could break me again, but she was wrong. I stood, the cool air steadying me, and headed inside. 3 days until the wedding, and I was ready to turn her world upside down. The estate's kitchen glowed under soft lights, the scent of coffee lingering as I sat at the island sketching designs to calm my nerves. 2 days remained until the wedding, and the USB drive with photos of David's Emma-like doll was hidden in my purse, my plan to expose him at the Seattle venue taking shape. But Emma's presence was a constant thorn, her provocations escalating every hour. Last night, she'd accidentally knocked over a vase in my room, smirking as the shards scattered. I'd argued with her in my past life, desperate to prove myself to David, but it always ended with him taking her side. Now reborn, I kept silent, letting her think she had the upper hand while I bided my time. This morning, Emma outdid herself. I found my room chaotic, drawers emptied, my sketchbook torn, my wedding dress crumpled on the floor with muddy footprints across its silk. She stood in the doorway, twirling a blonde curl. She said, "This room's too nice for you," her voice dripping with malice. "It's closer to Uncle David's. I want it." I'd confronted her in my past life, only to face David's dismissal. "She's just a kid, Claire." I knelt to pick up the dress, my heart pounding with suppressed rage. Emma stomped on my hand as I reached for it, grinding her heel into my fingers. Pain shot through me, and I gasped, shoving her back instinctively. She let out a gleeful laugh, then screamed, throwing herself down the stairs in a theatrical tumble. David burst from his study, his prayer beads still as he ran to her. Emma lay at the bottom, crocodile tears streaming down her face. "Uncle," she pushed me. She sobbed, clutching his arm. Claire trashed my stuff, then shoved me down the stairs. David scooped her up, his eyes scanning her for injuries, his tenderness a stark contrast to the coldness he aimed at me. "Claire," he said, his voice low and accusing. "Is this true?" I stood at the top of the stairs, my hand throbbing, the dress clutched to my chest. I'd begged him to believe me in my past life, but he never did. Now I met his gaze with defiance. "She trashed my room, David. She hurt me first." Emma wailed louder, burying her face in his shoulder. "She's lying! I'd never do that!" David's jaw tightened, his faith in Emma unwavering. "Apologize to her," he ordered, his tone cutting. "She's young Claire. You're the adult here." The words echoed my past life, each one a reminder of how he'd sidelined me for her. My parents' voices rang in my mind, my mom's warning. "He's blind to her cruelty." I'd called them yesterday, confessing how Emma's antics were wearing me down. My dad had growled, "Get out of there, Claire. You don't need him." Their support steadied me now. I forced a nod. "Fine, I'm sorry," I said, my voice flat. Emma's smug smile peeked from David's shoulder, her victory clear. But she wasn't done. "Uncle, I want ice cream from that shop in downtown Portland," she whined, her eyes glinting. "If Claire gets it, I'll forgive her." David glanced at me, his expression frosty. "Get it." I looked out the window. Rain poured in sheets, thunder rumbling over the hills. The estate was miles from town, and I didn't drive. The trek would mean hours in the storm, with no guarantee of a cab in this weather. "David, seriously," I said, my voice sharp. "You want me to walk through this for her?" His brows furrowed, his voice dropping to a cold edge. "Consider it a lesson. Go." My chest tightened, the sting of his dismissal sharper than the rain. I'd have gone desperate to please him in my past life. Now I saw it for what it was, another way to keep Emma happy at my expense. I grabbed my coat, my resolve hardening. As I stepped into the storm, the memory of my death flashed, smoke choking me, David's silhouette vanishing as he saved Emma's dog. This humiliation was nothing compared to that. I trudged down the muddy hill, rain soaking me through my hand, still aching from Emma's heel. When I returned with the ice cream, the estate was dark, every light off. Using my phone's flashlight, I found Emma's room. The door creaked open, revealing her nestled against David on the bed, his arm around her. Their closeness, a twisted mirror of the doll in the basement. The ice cream slipped from my hand, splattering on the floor. Emma jolted awake, shrieking, "Uncle, she did that on purpose. She knows I'm scared of loud noises." David's eyes met mine, cold and unyielding. "Buy another," he said, his voice flat. I stood there, soaked and shivering, my heart a battlefield of anger and resolve. 2 days left, and I was ready to end this. The rain battered the Oregon hills, turning the winding path from David Miller's estate into a muddy river. Claire Thompson, stood at the front door, my coat dripping, my hand still throbbing from Emma's cruel stomp earlier that day. The USB drive with photos of David's Emma-like doll hidden in my purse was my lifeline, a promise of retribution at the wedding in 2 days. But now Emma's latest demand hung over me like the storm clouds above. "I want ice cream from that shop in downtown Portland," she'd whined, her blue eyes glinting with malice. David, his prayer beads motionless, had turned to me with a frosty stare. "Get it?" he ordered, his voice as cold as the wind whipping through the trees. The estate was miles from town, isolated in the forested hills, and I didn't drive. The trek would mean hours in the downpour with little chance of a cab in this weather. "David, you're serious?" I asked, my voice sharp with disbelief. "You want me to walk through a storm for her ice cream?" His brows furrowed, his tone dropping to a chilling edge. "Consider it a lesson, Claire. Go." In my past life, I'd have obeyed, desperate to win his approval, but that Claire had died in a Miami fire, abandoned, as he saved Emma's dog. Now reborn, I saw his order for what it was, a way to keep Emma happy at my expense, just as he'd always done. My parents' voices echoed in my mind. I'd called them last night, my voice trembling as I recounted Emma's latest provocation, trashing my room, stomping on my hand. "Get out of there, Claire," my dad, John, had growled. "He's not worth it," my mom, Linda, added softly. "You're stronger than this, sweetheart." Their words were a shield, reminding me I was fighting for them as much as myself. I grabbed an umbrella, useless against the gale, and stepped into the storm. The path down the hill was slick, my boots sinking into mud as rain stung my face. My hand ached the bruise from Emma's heel pulsing with each step. The memory of my death surged smoke choking my lungs, David's silhouette vanishing as he chose Emma's dog over me. This humiliation was nothing compared to that, but it still burned. Hours later, soaked and shivering, I reached Portland's Pearl District ice cream shop. The neon sign flickered the streets deserted under the storm's wrath. I bought the mango sorbet Emma demanded, my fingers numb as I clutched the bag. The return trek was worse, the rain heavier, the hill a slog of mud. When I reached the estate, every light was off, the glass walls dark and silent. I navigated the foyer using my phone's flashlight, my wet shoes squeaking on the marble. I climbed to Emma's room, the sorbet melting in its bag. The door creaked open and my breath caught. Emma lay nestled against David on the bed, her blonde head tucked under his arm, their closeness a twisted echo of the doll in the basement. David was propped up, frozen, mid-motion, his eyes meeting mine in the dim light. The sorbet slipped from my hand, splattering on the floor with a wet thud. Emma jolted awake, shrieking, "Uncle, she did that on purpose. She knows I'm scared of loud noises." Her tears were instant, her performance flawless. David's gaze hardened, his voice flat. "Buy another Claire." My heart pounded, a mix of rage and exhaustion. I'd have begged him to see the truth in my past life, but now I stood silent, my resolve unshaken. David rose, brushing past me. He said, "I'll be at the chapel until morning," his prayer beads clicking as he left. In my past life, I'd learned this was his ritual. After indulging his desires with the doll, he'd retreat to a nearby chapel to repent, until dawn, seeking absolution for his obsession with Emma. Now he was leaving me to her mercy. Emma smirked from the bed, her voice taunting. "You're so pathetic, Claire. Running through a storm for me. Uncle will never love you like he loves me." I turned away, my soaked clothes clinging to my skin, and headed to my room. The wedding was 2 days away, and this moment only sharpened my purpose. I'd survived flames. I could survive this as I dried off. The USB drive in my purse felt heavier, a promise of justice. The estate's silence was suffocating, broken only by the faint rainwater drip from my clothes as I stood in my room toweling off after the stormy trek. One day remained until the wedding, and the USB drive with photos of David's Emma-like doll was my trump card, ready to expose his obsession at the Seattle venue. But Emma's cruelty was relentless, her latest stunt faking a fall down the stairs and blaming me still fresh. David's blind faith in her had stung. His order to fetch ice cream in a storm was a fresh wound. My hand bruised from her stomp throbbed as I hung my wedding dress back in the closet, its silk now stained with mud. In my past life, I'd endured her torments hoping David would see me, but that hope had died in the Miami fire. Now reborn, I was done playing her victim. Emma's voice pierced the quiet calling from her room. "Claire, come here," she demanded, her tone sharp. I ignored her, focusing on my sketchbook where I'd started designing again, a passion I'd abandoned for David. But the door burst open and Emma stormed in, her blue eyes blazing. "This is my room," she snapped, grabbing my belongings and tossing them to the floor. My sketchbook landed, open pages crumpling. "You don't belong here. Move to the guest room at the end of the hall." I stood, my voice steady. "This is my room, Emma." Her smirk widened and she kicked my wedding dress, leaving another muddy streak. "Not for long," she said, sauntering out. I knelt to gather my things, my heart racing with suppressed fury. My parents' words echoed my mom's gentle urging. "You're stronger than this." I'd called them this morning, confessing how Emma's manipulations were wearing me down. "She's trying to break you," my dad had said. "Don't let her." Their support kept me grounded, a reminder of why I was enduring this, to protect them from the grief of my past life's loss. But Emma wasn't done. As I organized my room that night, she returned with a new demand. "Uncle's asleep," she said, her voice low and menacing. "I want you to prove you're sorry for pushing me down the stairs." I stared, incredulous. "I didn't make you, Emma." She laughed, cold and cruel. "Tell that to Uncle. Now come with me." She led me to the bathroom where she ordered the staff to tie my wrists and stand me under the shower. "Turn it on," she commanded, her smile triumphant. "Cold water all night. Make sure she doesn't sleep." The servants hesitated, their eyes uneasy, but Emma snapped, "Do it or Uncle David will fire you all." Ice-cold water poured over me, soaking my clothes, chilling my bones. I shivered, my bruised hand aching, the memory of my death, flashing smoke flames, abandonment. Emma leaned against the wall, grinning. "You think you'll marry him? He'll never replace me in his heart." Want to bet he'll scold me a little, then forgive me. You're nothing, Claire. She turned and left the staff watching uncomfortably as I stood under the freezing spray. Hours blurred my body, numbed my mind, a haze of pain and resolve. The trauma of my death surged David's choice to save Emma's dog, leaving me to burn. This was another kind of fire, but it couldn't break me. I thought of my parents' faces when I told them of my rebirth. "We're with you," my mom had said. That promise kept me standing. By dawn, I collapsed, fever burning through me. I woke in a Portland hospital, an IV in my arm, David at my bedside. His prayer beads were still his face expressionless. "You're awake," he said, not meeting my eyes. "The doctor says it's just a fever. You'll stay here for a few days." I stared at him, my voice hoarse. "Emma did this, David. She tied me to a cold shower all night." He sighed dismissively. "She's spoiled, Claire. I've talked to her. Don't take it personally." His words were a slap, echoing my past life's pain. In that moment, I saw the truth David would never change. My fevered haze cleared, replaced by a steely resolve. I told him I'd attend the wedding straight from the hospital, my voice firm. "No need to pick me up," I said. He nodded and left his indifference a final nail in the coffin of my old love. As the nurse checked my chart, I touched the USB drive in my bag, hidden under the hospital blanket. 1 day left. Emma thought she'd won, but she'd only fueled my fire. I'd expose David's obsession and walk away free at last. The Seattle morning was crisp, the sky a pale gray. As I stepped out of the hospital, my fever broken, but my resolve burning hotter than ever. Today was the wedding day, the culmination of my plan to expose David Miller's twisted obsession with his niece Emma. The USB drive in my purse held photos of the life-size doll he'd commissioned, a grotesque replica of Emma crafted in San Francisco to satisfy his forbidden desires. In my past life, I'd died in a Miami fire abandoned by David as he saved Emma's dog. Now reborn, I'd orchestrated this grand wedding not to marry him, but to shatter his saintly facade. My parents, John and Linda Thompson, had called as I left the hospital. "Be safe, Claire," my mom whispered. "We're proud of you." Their support was my anchor, a reminder of the family I'd lost to grief in my past life. I wouldn't let them down. The venue, a glittering ballroom in downtown Seattle, sparkled with chandeliers and white roses, a stage fit for the spectacle I'd planned. Guests in tailored suits and elegant dresses filled the seats, their chatter buzzing with anticipation for the union of David Miller, Portland's ascetic philanthropist, and me, the woman who'd chased him for years. My wedding dress, cleaned of Emma's muddy footprints, clung to me like a second skin, its silk a bitter reminder of the love I'd once held. I slipped into the control room, my heart pounding, and handed the USB drive to a technician I'd paid to assist. "Play this when the ceremony starts," I whispered, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. He nodded, and I returned to the bridal suite, my reflection in the mirror showing a woman forged in fire, not the naive girl of my past. I lingered out of sight as the music swelled, watching David at the altar. His pale blue suit matched his eyes, his prayer beads tucked into a pocket, his face a mask of serene composure. Emma sat in the front row, her blonde curls perfect, her smile smug. She'd posted photos online last night wearing my wedding dress and my ring, even posing with David in a mock ceremony, each image a taunt. Her provocations had broken me in my past life, but now they fueled my resolve. The officiant began, and I pressed the signal to the technician. The giant screen behind David flickered and gasps erupted as the first photo appeared, David in his meditation room adjusting the Emma-like doll's sundress, his expression of shameful longing. More images followed, close-ups of the doll's face. Its eerie resemblance to Emma was undeniable. The ballroom dissolved into chaos. Whispers turned to shouts. "He's obsessed with his niece." "That's disgusting," a woman near the back muttered. "I always knew something was off about him." David's composure cracked, his face paling as he barked at his staff. "Turn it off." But the photos looped, each one a dagger to his reputation. Emma's smile vanished, her eyes wide with panic. Guests stared at her, their judgment shifting from David to her. I slipped out a side door, my heart racing with grim satisfaction. In my past life, I'd died silently, my pain unseen. Now the world saw David for what he was, a man hiding dark desires behind a monk-like facade. I left the venue, the Seattle skyline looming, as I stepped into a waiting cab, my parents' number already dialed. "It's done," I told them, my voice breaking. "I'm free." The cab wove through the city rain beginning to fall again. My parents' relief crackled through the phone. "Come home, Claire," my dad said. "You don't need him." Though they couldn't see, I nodded, tears mixing with the rain on my cheeks. The trauma of my death smoke flames, David's betrayal, still haunted me, but this act of revenge had loosened its grip. I wasn't just avenging myself, I was reclaiming the life I'd lost for me and for my parents who'd grieved me in my past life. As the cab pulled away, I glanced back at the venue, imagining David's rage, Emma's fear. The doll, that sickening symbol of his obsession, was no longer my burden. I'd turned it into his undoing. The cab merged onto the highway, and I exhaled the weight of 5 years of unrequited love lifting. I was gone, and David would never find me. The Portland estate was a hollow shell, its glass walls reflecting the gray dawn as David Miller stormed through the foyer, his prayer beads abandoned on a table. The wedding scandal had spread like wildfire, Seattle's elite whispering about his sick obsession with Emma the doll, photos plastered across social media. He'd canceled the ceremony, his reputation in tatters, but his rage was fixed on me, Claire Thompson. He knew I'd orchestrated the exposure, slipping away before he could confront me. My belongings were gone from the estate, and I moved out with my parents' help while he was distracted by the chaos. He called my phone, but I'd turned it off, severing the last tie. "Search the city," he snapped at his assistant, his voice raw. "Find Claire. Now." David's world was unraveling. In my past life, I'd chased him for 5 years, blind to his fixation on Emma, his non-blood-related niece, whom he'd raised since her parents' death. I'd died in a Miami fire, abandoned for her dog, my love, a tool to mask his shame. Now reborn, I'd turned the tables, exposing the doll he'd hidden in the basement, a custom creation from a San Francisco artisan, its existence a secret he thought safe. The staff, usually loyal, began to crack under his questions. An elderly housekeeper, her arm bruised from Emma's recent outburst, stepped forward. She said, "Miss Claire's gone, sir," her voice trembling but firm. "She loved you, but you let Miss Emma hurt her. I saw it, her tears, her pain. You sided with that girl every time." David's face darkened, the housekeeper's words cutting deeper than the scandal. "When did Claire move out?" he demanded. The housekeeper hesitated. "Miss Emma told us not to tell you, said it was a minor issue." Fury surged in his chest. Not at me, but at Emma, whose manipulations were becoming clear. He stormed to her room, where she sat tearful and defiant. "Uncle, you can't be mad at me," she pleaded, reaching for him. "Claire framed me. She's always hated me." David froze, hearing her words, but remembering mine from the past life. Accusations of Emma's lies, pleas he'd ignored. Then he overheard her on the phone, her voice low and scheming. "Ryan helped me find Claire," she said. "Make sure she never comes back. If you do, I'll marry David and we'll both be rich." The betrayal hit like a physical blow. David pushed open the door, his expression steel. Emma paled, her act crumbling. "Uncle, I didn't mean," she started, but he cut her off, grabbing her arm. "You've been lying all along," he roared, his composure gone. "You framed Claire, hurt her, and I believed you." He dragged her to the basement, locking her in a storage room, the same place he'd hidden the doll, which he'd since destroyed in a fit of shame. "You'll stay there until you learn," he said, his voice cold. But as he walked away, his anger gave way to panic. Claire was gone, and he felt the weight of her absence for the first time, not as a shield, but as someone he'd failed. He scoured Seattle, then Portland, offering a $10 million reward for any trace of me. My parents, John and Linda, had helped me vanish, their support unwavering after my hospital stay. I'd called them after the wedding, my voice steady. "I'm leaving Oregon," I said. "I need to start over." My mom's relief was palpable. "We're coming with you, Claire. We won't lose you again. In my past life, their grief had killed them. Now they were my strength." David's search was futile. My phone was off, my trail cold. He returned to the estate, the silence mocking him. The housekeeper's words echoed, "She loved you, but you let Emma destroy her." He rubbed his temples, the memory of my face hurt, defiant, haunting him. Had he loved me? He'd told himself Emma was his obsession, but now with her locked away and my absence of void, he wasn't sure. David stood in the basement, staring at where the doll had been. He'd ordered it years ago, a shameful outlet for feelings he couldn't admit, but destroying it hadn't erased his guilt. Claire's plan had exposed more than his secret, forcing him to see his blindness. He sank to the floor, the cold concrete grounding him. "Claire," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Where are you?" But I was already gone, my new life beginning far from his reach, my heart no longer his to break. The New York skyline glittered through the window of my tiny Brooklyn apartment, a world away from the glass-walled estate in Oregon where I'd left David Miller and his toxic obsession with his niece Emma. The wedding scandal in Seattle had been my triumph, the photos of his Emma-like doll, crafted by a San Francisco artisan, to indulge his forbidden desires, exposing his shame to a gasping crowd. I'd slipped away in a cab, and my parents, John and Linda Thompson, were waiting for me at their Portland home. "You're free, Claire," my mom had said over the phone, her voice thick with relief. In my past life, I died in a Miami fire abandoned by David for Emma's dog, and my parents' grief had broken them. Now reborn, I'd vowed to protect them and myself, and I was keeping that promise. I enrolled in a prestigious design school in Manhattan, a dream I'd abandoned to chase David for 5 years. The first day I sat in a sunlit studio sketching fabrics and silhouettes, my hands steady for the first time in weeks. My professor, a sharp-eyed woman named Elena, praised my work, saying, "You've got a spark, Claire. Don't let anyone dim it." Her words were a balm, healing the scars of David's betrayal. Nightmares of the fire still woke me, smoke choking my lungs, flames licking my skin, but they were fading, replaced by the thrill of creation. My parents joined me in New York, their immigration papers finalized, determined to share my fresh start. We rented a cramped apartment in Queens, where my dad's booming laugh filled the kitchen as he fixed the leaky sink and my mom's homemade lasagna warmed our evenings. "We're a family again," she said, hugging me tight. Their presence was my anchor, a reminder of why I'd fought. One spring afternoon, as cherry blossoms bloomed in Central Park, I met Ethan Chen, a Chinese-American artist with a gentle smile and paint-stained hands. We collided at a campus art show, my sketches beside his vibrant canvases. "Your designs tell a story," he said, his dark eyes kind. He shared his dreams over coffee in a Greenwich Village cafe, painting murals that captured New York's pulse. His warmth starkly contrasted David's icy detachment, and our talks grew into dates, then love. Ethan didn't know my past, but he sensed my strength. "You're a survivor," he said one night, his hand in mine as we walked the Brooklyn Bridge. Once burned by David's betrayal, my heart began to heal, each moment with Ethan a step toward a life I'd never dared imagine. Meanwhile, David's world unraveled. He'd offered a $10 million reward for my whereabouts, scouring Seattle and Portland, but I'd vanished, my trail erased with my parents' help. He'd locked Emma in the estate's basement after discovering her schemes, her lies, her plots with a friend named Ryan to keep me away. The doll, that sickening symbol of his obsession, was gone, burned in a fit of guilt, but its shadow lingered. One day, as I sketched in my studio, David appeared outside my classroom, his monk-like facade shattered. His eyes were red, his voice trembling. "Claire, it was all my fault," he choked out. "I let Emma hurt you. I thought she was innocent, but she schemed against you. I've punished her, locked her away. I love you, Claire." I realized it too late. I stared at him, my heart unmoved. The Claire who'd chased him was gone, burned away in the fire of his betrayal. "David," I said, my voice calm, "I don't love you anymore. I want my own life now. Leave." His tears fell, but I felt nothing. No anger, no pity. He begged, dropping to his knees, a ring in his hand. "I designed this for you," he said. "Please give me a chance." I stepped back, my resolve ironclad. "There's no going back," I said, turning away. He lingered outside my school for days, leaving roses I tossed in the trash. Finally, I called his grandfather, a stern patriarch in San Francisco, and sent unreleased videos of the doll. "Make him stop," I said. The next day, David was gone, forced back to Oregon by his family's command. I stood on my apartment's fire escape, the city humming below, and felt a weight lift. My parents' laughter drifted from the kitchen, Ethan's latest painting propped against the wall. The trauma of my death still lingered in quiet moments, but it no longer defined me. I was Claire Thompson, designer, daughter, survivor, not David's pawn. New York's chaos was my canvas, and I was ready to paint a new life free of his shadow. The Arizona desert stretched before me, its red rocks glowing under a starlit sky. I sat beside Ethan Chen, my husband of 20 years, on a blanket in Sedona. Our retirement trip was a celebration of a life rebuilt. New York had been my rebirth, where I'd graduated from design school and joined a prestigious firm, my collections earning praise for their bold lines and emotional depth. Ethan and I were married in a simple Brooklyn ceremony, and my parents, John and Linda, were beaming in the front row. We raised a son, Noah, and twin daughters, Lily and Grace, their laughter filling our brownstone. Now at 55, with our children growing up and starting their own lives, Ethan and I were free to wander our first stop, America's national parks, where I rediscovered the beauty of vast horizons. In my past life, I died in a Miami fire abandoned by David Miller for his niece Emma's dog. My love for him a chain that bound me to pain. Reborn, I'd exposed his obsession with a doll modeled after Emma, shattering his reputation at our Seattle wedding. I'd fled to New York, my parents by my side, their support healing the wounds of their grief from my past life. My mom's lasagna nights and my dad's gruff encouragement grounded me as I built a new future. Ethan's love, steady and unassuming, had mended my heart. Our romance was ordinary, yet profound. We'd traveled to Yosemite, Yellowstone, and now Sedona, each landscape a reminder of life's expanse beyond David's narrow world. Years ago, a friend in Portland had shared news of David. After I'd sent his grandfather those doll videos, he'd returned to Oregon, his search for me abandoned. He'd locked Emma away for 6 years, her schemes framing me, plotting with Ryan exposed. His grandfather freed her, fearing for her life, but her reputation was ruined, and her name was synonymous with scandal. David never married. His home was filled with my photos, a shrine to a love he'd realized too late. He handed his company to a cousin and became a monk, retreating to a temple in the Oregon hills. My friend asked if I'd visit him, but I shook my head. There was no need. The Claire who'd loved him was gone, her ashes scattered in the fire of my rebirth. My parents had passed in their 80s, their final years filled with our family's laughter, grandkids tumbling in their queen's backyard, Ethan's paintings on their walls. Their deaths were peaceful, unlike the grief that had killed them in my past life. I'd kept my promise to protect them, living well for their sake. Now I felt only gratitude under Sedona's stars, Ethan's hand in mine. My career flourished and my designs were worn on runways from New York to Paris. Noah was a teacher, Lily a doctor, Grace an artist like her dad. Our twins' babies and grandchildren had briefly drawn us back to New York, but the road called again. I thought of David sometimes, not with bitterness, but with calm. His monk's robes and temple solitude were his atonement, not my concern. The trauma of my death, once a nightly torment, had faded to a distant ache, replaced by the warmth of Ethan's laugh, the pride in my children's eyes. I'd once believed David was my world, but that world had been so small, consumed by a love that burned me alive. My life was vast mountains, rivers, family love. As Ethan pointed out a constellation, I leaned against him, the desert air cool on my skin. 2 words filled my heart: contentment, gratitude. I'd been reborn to live, not to linger in the ashes of the past.